Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Keys to Real Estate. I'm your host, Mary Schuster. Well, it's a short intro today as we rejoin for part 2 of my conversation with Lisa Walden, talking about leading different generations in today's workplace. Now, if you missed part 1, maybe pause here and enjoy last week's episode before picking up again with this one. And please enjoy the great ideas from author, speaker, consultant, and problem solver, the talented Lisa Walden. The presenting sponsor of the Keys to Real Estate podcast is RamQuest. RamQuest fosters a customer-first culture built around an unwavering commitment to provide solutions that don't just meet, but exceed expectations. RamQuest's newest title and settlement production solution, Horizon, delivers unparalleled efficiency, robust features, and scalability to ensure you have tools to boost productivity and elevate performance like never before. Horizon streamlines your operation with secure 24/7 access, automatic updates, and all the power that only the cloud can offer. Plus, Horizon offers a direct connection to the industry's most extensive network of service providers and partners. Experience Horizon for yourself when you visit ramquest.com. And now, please enjoy the show. I love every time we get to talk because you always make me see something in a new way. And that just really was an aha moment for me because, when you were describing both the millennials and the Gen Zs and sort of the social compact of the time, and we're each handed a different social compact or professional compact, work compact, whatever that is. And at some point we get to the place where we say, and it happened to, I'm Gen X, it happened to the boomers too. I've fulfilled my side of all this bargain. I've done everything right is the phrase that you hear a lot. And yet this bargain didn't happen. And now I'm irritated. And usually I will say for at least my generation and above, I think in many ways that sometimes resulted in a midlife crisis, professional, personal, or both. And it sounds like the Gen Zers are kind of having a quarter life crisis and saying, I'm not willing to forego all this. I don't want to come to the end of a long line and realize that the social compact I thought I struck may or may not work.
Well, and if you look at the economics of it all, for boomers, if you worked hard and you put in the work, you could to some degree achieve some version of the American dream. When we look at the cost of buying a house these days, the cost of getting a college degree versus the average hourly pay, let's say, hourly pay has gone up maybe 3 times since like the 60s versus the cost of getting a college degree has gone up like 13 times. And that across the board, when we're looking at what is the promise of working hard, the promise of capitalism, the promise of putting in a hard day's work and you'll be able to, afford a home, afford this lifestyle, it's just not there for Gen Z. So they're not seeing the benefits of working that way either because they're just not able to live the same way as generations prior were in the kind of the economy and the circumstances that they grew up in. So there's multi-layers for why they're not necessarily buying into the work is life mindset because for them it's not. They're working their butts off and barely able to afford groceries. So the social compact, as you said, is not really paying its dividends.
Well, and it's interesting because there's no doubt the economics have changed, and also the buffet of choices has changed. It's proliferated. I think I yes and say also that's also part of where you're at in life too. Because trust me, if you looked at me as a Gen X person in my 20s, if you had asked me when did I think I would be able to afford a house, if I were being honest, I'd have said maybe by my early 40s. Now, it's easier to look at when you're further down the line and say, oh, well, you had this college education and you were able to be a homeowner and yes, but not all at once. And there were choices, there were opportunity costs, which only start to bring more to the buffet after like a decade or two. So I think all those things are true. I think noticing that where you're at in space and time, and if you're 30 and you've got a ton of college debt and you'd like to buy a house, and yes, houses have gotten very expensive, and so has the cost of the money needed to borrow to buy them. I understand why a natural conclusion to that could be work isn't life for me. Life is life for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the hybrid work, I wanted to see if you could share a few practical tips because people are beyond the mechanics now. Like 4 years ago, we did an oh crap emergency version of this, so we have all of the communication channels and all of that in place. But beyond just the necessity, do you have a couple of tips for people that can really make it better, make it work better?
Yeah, so it's sort of, there's a few different things I can point to. And the thing is, it's funny, you said, a few years ago we were in the, oh crap, we have to figure this out moment. I don't think we're there, but I do think hybrid virtual work, we are babies in terms of its growth and its establishment in the American workforce and global workforce. So we're still learning. We're still there. And I think grace to ourselves, grace to our employees, grace for the process is like number one. We need to have grace as we figure it out. We are figuring it out. So we're still in that iterative experimentation phase. And that means things are going to work and things are not going to work. And that's okay because we need to think, not to, be super cliche, but we do need to think outside the box. We need to think beyond what we did in the office and not just copy paste because we can't copy paste. It's a different format. It's a different way of doing things. I mean, even just this is kind of a tangential example, but it does make sense. It does apply. When I do presentations in person, I would never in a million years ask the audience audience of 500, please chat amongst yourselves while I'm on stage. That will make this presentation so much better. No, that would be a disaster. It would be like lunch hour. But virtually, that is one of the most important things I do is I ask people, please jump in the chat box as I am talking, as I'm going through content. I want you to have conversations. I want you to make comments, discuss with one another, bring things up, ask questions. And it changes the game. It changes participation. It changes attention so drastically because people are active. They're not just sitting at their computers with their iPhones or their smartphones begging for their attention. And they're doing something. They're involved. They're active. So that's a great example. And you cannot copy paste. It's a different environment. It's a different setup. It's a different thing. So we can't just port over, for example, expectations of presence in a virtual if people are working from home versus if they're in the office. It's a different thing. So we have to think differently. We have to give ourselves grace for experimenting. We absolutely, leaders, this is a shift that is hard for people to kind of swallow. We need to shift from obsessing over time and productivity to obsessing over building trust and psychological safety. Those are the components that are absolutely critical in order to build an effective virtual hybrid work environment. If you don't trust the people on your team to do the work, even if they have a mouse jiggler, you have the wrong person on your team. At the end of the day, that is the point. Not the mouse jiggler, but the trust. And if there is not trust, if there's not a managed trust, you're just going to be chasing people. You're just going to be chasing people and putting people on an improvement plan the whole time. You really have to be building trust and the psychological safety piece of everyone needs to trust each other. So really creating an environment where people are not judgmental, they're not jumping to negative conclusions. They really give people the benefit of the doubt when merited, which should be most of the time. Those pieces are most critical to work in a hybrid dynamic. Also individualization, really getting to know the people that you're leading. So much like one size does not fit all, porting over how we work in office versus how we work behind computers in our homes, we can't just assume everyone wants to be led and managed in the same way. So as you know, Mary, I'm a huge advocate of the idea of the platinum rule, where we treat others the way that they wish to be treated. And so leaders need to do that work of understanding who the people are that they lead. And that means being a little bit more intentional about soliciting that information from the people that they're leading. When do you really thrive? When is your brain alive? Are you a morning person or an afternoon or evening person? For me, morning, if you get me in the morning, I will be absolutely at like a 0 or a 1. I have nothing to give in the morning. The coffee is setting in. I mean, I can do, basic things, but do not pull me into like a huge brainstorming session or an early morning podcast. Mary, if we were talking at like 6 a.m., this would be a very boring conversation. And I know myself. And so that's a question leaders can ask. Are you introverted or extroverted? Are you someone who, when I'm giving you a task or project, wants to know the roadmap for how to get there? Or do you want me to just tell you, this is the outcome I expect, you figure it out your own way? All of these things, these pieces that we can dig into to really individualize our approach for people while still being fair. We can be fair to everyone while treating them a little bit differently based on how they prefer. And of course, leaders also need to share their preferences as well. At the end of the day, it's so simple and so complex at the same time. We need to communicate our expectations. We need to do the work to solicit that information. And we need to say the words of what we want. So often people will bring me a problem. Then I will say, okay, have you addressed this with the person, or have you said those words to that person? And they're like, well, I guess no, haven't said it quite like that. I mean, and you don't, you can soften the way that you say things, but say the words, communicate, do the intentional work to get that context. It's as simple and as complex as that.
And I think it is as simple as complex as that. Yes, I agree. And it's almost over communicating, but I think specifically communicating more often than, this is what I found. I joined a new team and work from home. And like after a team that I'd been with for decades, now I have this new team and I'm not even the same city. Yeah. And so it's that trying to build a rapport, trying to make your spot on an existing team. And one of the things that I changed, I haven't been exactly good at this before, is not only, because normally like if you're collaborating and you finish a project together, there's a high five. Or if you see somebody else doing the work, like maybe there's a big meeting or maybe there's something, you call it out, you go, nice work. In this case, you almost have to not only reach in and say, hey, this thing you did right here, I loved your work. And here specifically is what I noticed about it. And that brings some of the personal into the discussion, because if you're in a hybrid situation, you don't always know each other like you would if you were in the office together 40 to 60 hours a week. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%. So you're getting to this idea of really away from just transactional work and more relational. And that's one of the dangers of hybrid work. There's a few things that, my business partner and I kind of identify as trouble zones or dangers. And that is one of them, is we're operating behind computers. Often people are jumping from Zoom to Zoom or, video call to video call. There's no buffer space in between. People are like, I have to go to the bathroom or I need to grab something to eat. They don't have time for anything. So it feels like, first of all, we absolutely should be buffering those. We should not be doing hour-long meetings. They should be 52, 55. But second of all, we need to, as a part of our daily to-dos, add a transactional element to it. Like, am I showing up as a human, or am I just trying to cross things off my list? Absolutely, we need to make the effort to be relational. We need to make the effort to reach out to someone, to check in, to do a call out, and I know people roll their eyes at this, but to leave, 3 minutes ahead of a meeting to do something human, and not just, it doesn't have to just be like, hey, how's your weekend? My weekend was great. How's your weekend? We can be much more intentional about it. I'm a huge advocate of rituals, of these team rituals that are, beyond just a like team bonding moment, but have meaning. One of my favorite ones came from a client that I worked with in 2021. They told me that in the pandemic, they had been all in person and then they all scattered, and, obviously we're all working virtually. And one of the things they did to kind of build in a team point of connection was they would have a weekly meeting on Mondays. And at the top of the Monday meeting, they would rotate around their team who would choose the song of the week. And so somebody would come prepared and pick the song of the week that they would add to a Spotify playlist. So, they would play a snippet of the song. The person would say why they chose the song. And throughout they started this in 2020. So by the end of the year, they had this playlist for the year. And you can imagine, of course, it was the year of COVID. So it was a little bit of a depressing playlist, but they started it as a tradition, as this team ritual. And, they're adding new people onto the team now that those people are part of the ritual as well. And they have now, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, they have these playlists for the team that they can look back on, and they have this intentional moment of connection that they built into their meetings. It doesn't just feel like, oh, what was your favorite childhood memory? And there's nothing wrong with that. That's totally has its place, but this feels a little bit more intentional and really connects the team as a whole. So I absolutely agree. We need to lean into that relational piece even more when we're thinking about hybrid work dynamics and setups.
I love that. I love that so much. Support for today's episode is provided by October Research. October Research provides national coverage of case law, news, regulatory updates, and competitive business strategies critical for sustaining an innovative and compliant real estate business operation. Our portfolio publications offer independent and unbiased information that helps you stay educated and informed on what matters most to your business. So visit octoberresearch.com to learn more about our portfolio of real estate publications, sign up for free email news, educational webinars, and premier industry events for thought leaders. Knowledge, the competitive advantage. Well, in your book, I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. It's called The Future of Work is Human. And it just has such great discussions, statistics, advice, tips, and tricks for putting that relational aspect into the work. And, you talk a lot. You can pick, if you have a favorite puppy, I'd love for you to talk about it. I love when you talk about empathy and collaboration, implementing changes, some advice. You have some advice for people who are trying to create a more human-centric workplace. Talk about your book, if you would, because I love it. It's
Absolutely.
a great book.
Yeah. I love to talk about the book. Writing a book is one of the most painful things of the entire world. I'm not one of those inspirational people who are like, wow, I can't wait to write my next one. No, it was tough. It was really hard. We will write the next one. It'll probably be on Gen Z, since that's what most people ask us for. But for now, it's that project is on ice as we continue talking about and really putting this one out into the world. So this book, the whole framing for it was, we actually started writing a book pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic hit, and we realized this was an inflection point in the way that the world of work worked, and that things were changing dramatically. As I said, toothpaste came out of the tube. We were not going back to the way things were. This was a moment in history that we will look back on and say, this is the moment that everything changed. And for us, everything changed in it's a both and. There's negatives and positive, but there is a really great positive to us in that the world of work for many people became more humanized. We cracked a window into each other's homes. We realized that we are simply human beings trying to live our lives. A lot of people had a front row seat to their peers' tragic moments and moments of grief. And so it was a very humanizing moment in our work history. We wanted to capture what happened during pandemic years that has really shifted our mindset, and how do we move forward now that this has happened, now that we kind of cracked the glass and the way it was and released some of the white knuckling. How do we move forward really carefully and mindfully to craft workplaces that honor the humanity in us first and foremost? Because we're working an average, the average human works about 90,000 hours in their lifetime. That's about a third of our lives. And what a absolute horror to think that so many people spend that time miserable at work. And it's not just, it's everyone. People are struggling on all different points of the hierarchy at work. So the whole intention of our book is, how do we make work better? How do we make it more human? How do we all play a role in crafting that humanity, whether you're first day on the job, you're an intern, or you are the CEO, owner? We all have some ownership and some ability to do that. Yes, our impact is different, of course, but we all can take a little bit of ownership in our sphere of influence. So all of the chapters have to do with that. One of my personal favorites is the first one, Humans Not Robots. People will say to us, don't you regret calling your book that? Because isn't the future of work AI? No, for us, it is absolutely not. Of course, AI is going to transform our entire world in good ways and bad. But for us, it, in the good ways, is it frees up our time to focus on the human. It takes off some of those rote tasks so that we can be more human at work and focus on the harder things like emotional intelligence, connection, communication. That for me is a huge chapter. It speaks to my heart. We also, have a chapter on compassionate leadership. And to me, the biggest piece there, and I think the way that Hannah and I diverge in terms of how we talk about compassion and leadership, is we argue that compassion first and foremost needs to be applied to yourself as a leader. So it's something that I think gets passed over so often, is you jump to, servant leadership and showing up for other people. You have to show up for yourself, because we're seeing what happens when you don't. Talking about Gen Z kind of assessing what work life looks like, what their work ethic looks like. One of the things that we're seeing is they're looking at these, older leaders, other generations, burn themselves out and work themselves to the bone. And the leaders will say, oh, I do this because I want to be there for my people, which is lovely. But the problem is Gen Z is now saying, well, I don't want that life for me. Like, I don't want to have to give up everything and sacrifice so much to be a leader. The pay is not worth it. The status is not worth it. My life is more important to me than giving everything for a job. So that giving that compassion to yourself works on so many different fronts. First, it's better for you. You can't pour from an empty cup, but also you are creating a stronger pipeline of future leaders by doing that, because you're making it a more realistic, more human job. And so it's just, I think that's one of the most important things that I always think about when working with leaders, is that make sure you extend self-compassion first and foremost.
That is that is such a powerful tip. And some of the pushback that we get from, again, my generation and older, it tends to be, well, nobody was interested in who I was as a human when I was starting out at work, and we just grunted along and did the things, pushed the rock up the hill for decades, and eventually we got to a spot where we could have a little respect. Damn it! And
Right.
it's so important. I think I always ask the second question of, okay, nobody made a space for you to be a human at your work early in your career, and they're like, that's right, and I'll do it too. That's right, nobody did. And then I'll just follow up with, wouldn't it have been nice if they would have? And invariably, some of that
Yes.
posture goes away, and they go, oh, yeah. Yeah, maybe it would have been a little
Yep.
nicer if that was an option. It wasn't an option then, but we can make it an option now.
That is such a great, I love that. I'm going to take that, Mary. I'm going to use that, because that is such a great just point of reflection. And people will say to me similar things like, this is so unfair. I just didn't have it like this, and nobody cared about, I pay so many dues. I walked uphill both ways in the snow barefoot to get to where I am. And, these kids just want to hitch an Uber ride. And I tell
Yep.
them, I just validate, because it's not fair. Actually, it is not fair. That is the way of it. It's not fair. And is it not our job as individuals, just a greater purpose as human beings, to make it better for the generations that come after us? And so I don't want to have, Gen Z go through the same stuff that me as a millennial, that I went through when I entered the workplace. I hope to make it better for them, and hopefully they make it better for Gen Alpha and the generations that come afterwards. It's our responsibility to improve upon and take the information that we've had, that we've learned, the lessons that we've learned, to make it better for the generations after us, not to have to put them through the same, training course that we went through. We hopefully want to make it better for them.
Are you paying them back? Or are you paying it forward? I mean, really, because a lot of it, when we get our posture gets like this, it's like, well, I had to do it, and they're going to have to do it. It's like, oh, well, that sounds like you're wanting a group to pay back that didn't do that to you. That was upstream. So who are you paying back? I mean, wouldn't it be a lot nicer to just pay it forward?
Yep. I love that framing. Yeah, it's 100%. Pay it forward all the way.
Thank you you are to me the generational and workplace whisperer. So I always love having a time to catch up with you, to see what's going on out in the world. And you always have such not only fantastic ideas and ideals, you have such practical tips for things to try to achieve this different world we're talking about, and help shuttle us over the threshold of some of these changes. And so I love having the opportunity to check in. I hope we can check in again soon.
Absolutely.
The information
Anytime,
you bring is just imperative. Thank you so much, Lisa.
Thank you. It's always great speaking to a fellow inquisitive, curious mind. So thank you so much. I always love our conversations, and absolutely let me know when the next one is.
Thanks again, Lisa, for the great ideas. I love your fresh perspective, and you've given me more to think about, as you always do. Audience, if you'd like to reach Lisa to talk about how to evolve your workplace more intentionally, or if you need a speaker for an upcoming event, her contact information is linked in today's show notes. And if you're interested in checking out her book, The Future of Work is Human, we've included a link to it on Amazon too. Check it out. We'll keep working to bring you the guests and topics that help you reimagine how to hold your keys to real estate. And until next time, I'm Mary Schuster for October Research, where knowledge is the competitive advantage.